All right, joining us to talk about strengthening women participation in politics and in leadership in Nigeria is Nkiru Uzodi. She's a senior program officer at the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. She joins us from our studios in Abuja. Welcome to Africa 54. Now, Nigeria has had this policy in place that makes provision for 35% affirmative action, that's 35% involvement of women in political and governance processes. Well, yet we'll still have that participation quite low, both in elective and appointive positions. What do you bring this to? Can it be referred to as just a case of poor implementation?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I think it's a case of poor implementation, but also I also think there's a case of lack of ownership of the policy. I mean, if we say we want 35% of women represented in elective offices, I think the citizens, the women groups, the political institutions, have to own that. I think that's very, very critical to the success of the policy. But also, I think there's also a question of lack of political will on the part of the leadership to actually implement this policy. We've had this policy since 2016. This is more than 10 years, and no concrete measures have been taken in furtherance of the policy. And also, I think it's also important for us to realize that in recent times, the responsibility actually for attaining these benchmarks have been put on women. So there's a misapplication, of the solution. There's a wrong diagnosis of the problem. So if it is diagnosed as a question of resources, if the problem is diagnosed as the woman is not qualified to run, a lot of the effort actually goes to that. But however, it's actually deeper than that. There are actually mechanisms of exclusion at work. There are a lot of women who are qualified to run, but most of them don't get past the candidate level. They don't get selected, and even when the party puts them forward, they don't win. So I think right now, the focus has to shift from the woman to the political institutions, and by that I mean our political parties, who are the gatekeepers and who actually nominate candidates, and also our legislative and the National Assembly. I think right now that should be the focus, because we have a lot of women who are qualified, but our institutions have not taken the right actions. They have not provided the enabling environment for these women to emerge as candidates and win elections.
Now, well, in some areas, culture is deemed as a factor that fuels some of these inequalities that you've highlighted. How much influence and how much can we leverage and ensure that we do something about that?
Culture is definitely a factor, but it's not the only factor. I think the political barriers are actually more deep-rooted. In terms of the cultural stereotypes, I think that can be countered with advocacy, with awareness, which a lot of women groups are actually doing right now. But I feel that, awareness, enlightenment campaigns, they take a lot of time. Attitudes don't change in one day, they change over time. Of course, people have to be convinced, that women, coming into elective offices are not coming there to threaten the men. They're coming there because they bring unique perspectives. They come with unique experiences. I think that has to be communicated. It's going to take quite some time.
Now, the ratio of women to men in Nigeria's upper and lower chamber of the National Assembly also shows that there is a gap in that particular area. What do you think women can do to bridge and contribute to bridging this gap?
For me, I think affirmative action is the best way to go. The global average for women in parliament is about 24%. Nigeria ranks 180 out of 193 countries when it comes to number of women in parliament. And all the parliaments, all the national assemblies around the world who have gone beyond that 35% benchmark have used some kind of quota, some kind of special measure, affirmative action. Training women, improving their access to finance, to resources and networks is good, but it puts us on the slow or incremental track. And if we remain on this track, it's going to take decades for us to actually get to 30 or 35%. The quickest way, the best way to actually close that gap is for us to adopt affirmative action policies. And that's by putting pressure on the National Assembly to actually legislate some kind of quotas or special measures into our constitution and into our electoral laws. That is how Rwanda, Namibia, South Africa, that is how they've achieved the high numbers that they have in their parliaments right now.
All right, then, Nkiru Uzodi, Senior Program Officer at the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. Thank you for talking to us today on Africa 54.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a film festival for inmates in Tunisia. The Carthage International Film Festival plays a role in prisoner rehabilitation.